And I think that's a really good point.
Yeah.
And you bring up society. Have you ever, there's this term called a radical environmental mutation.
Oh.
Do you know anything about that? It's basically, it's the idea, right? Okay, this is going to be a kind of a long explanation, but bear with me.
No,
right?
I'm interested.
So as humans, right, individuals, we look at time as very short segments of time within our own lifetime.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Decades, years, right? Very short.
Yeah.
But when we're able to step back and look at the greater kind of span of time that goes beyond our lifetime, we get to see like bigger patterns. Happen, right?
Yeah.
And more like changes over a long course of time to human evolution, human genetics, behavior, the way our bodies and brains are wired to interact with the environment around us.
Yeah.
So there's this idea called a radical environmental mutation, which basically, from the beginning, basically it's like from the Pleistocene era, which is like basically humans and pre-humans have 99% of all human experience has been hunter-gatherer experience. 99% actually has been living as hunter-gatherers. And relatively recently, there was the agricultural revolution with the advent of agriculture and settlements and cities and things like that. But
Industrial revolution.
Yeah, well, so I'm going to get to that. But the agricultural revolution, very little thing, like, you know, like there was some kind of evolutionary changes, a little bit that happened during then. But then when you talk about the biggest change, one of the biggest changes of recent time is really the Industrial Revolution. And that dates back only 200 years ago. So that's really only, that's like 4 or 5 generations of people. Yeah. It's like nothing. It's literally nothing.
Yeah, it's a blink of an eye.
Yeah, so obviously during that time, there has been no human real evolution or changes to the way we're wired or our genetics or anything like that.
Yeah.
Yet our environments have completely changed.
Oh, totally.
So what this idea is that we're actually still wired genetically, physiologically, neurally. We're still wired
for a different environment.
For a completely different environment. Yep. We're wired to be hunter-gatherers because 99% of our human experience has been that way.
And we don't evolve that quickly.
We don't evolve. We evolve very slowly.
Yeah, very slowly relative to the way that information.
Yeah. So now all of a sudden, just a few generations ago, you go through Industrial Revolution, we're living in this whole different modern society. So that's the radical environmental mutation where all of a sudden we're not ready for this. Our bodies and minds are not built for this, are not built to be sedentary, are not built to be indoors, are not built to be sleep deprived and stressed at work and all these things.
Or so digitally connected, which is another.
Or digitally, the technology is a whole different can of worms, right? Where now, in the recent years, you see that spike, generation after generation, the rates of mental illness, depression, these things are going up, they're not going down. And so it's like this idea of like, we're just not built for this.
Yeah.
And if you look at like modern day, like Aboriginal tribes, and there have been a lot of deep studies that go back decades where they're focused on like studying a lot of these tribes that live like secluded, and their lives and the way they live are a lot more similar to like ancient hunter-gatherer lifestyles.
Yeah.
And you basically see none of like obesity, you see none of diabetes, you don't see asthma, you don't see cancer, depression, you don't see these things. Yeah, anxiety, suicide. These are basically non-existent in these societies.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not end all and be all, but it's interesting to look at that body of research and evidence and think about this whole idea.
Yeah.
And being like, well, we're kind of like a fish out of water right now.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, definitely. And I see that as we flail in sort of the internet age, right? And sort of our relationship a lot of times to technology and social media use and social media particularly. And I will admit that I have a certain type of relationship, right, with this, and that I'm a clinician, right? And so I see people having a maladaptive relationship to technology and maybe addicted to social media and seeing the effects of social media use and on things like anxiety in adolescence or even in myself, right? So I admit that it's a very particular kind of a perspective, but you're right. I don't think we have evolved or developed, however you want to put it, in a way that we can handle these things responsibly and that we can understand its impact.